Hello and welcome to this week's BizSmart Lunch and Learn webinar. Our weekly webinars are aimed to provide advice and share knowledge amongst business owners on key business topics, and this is part of our service to our Smart Room members. If you're not already a member or a BizSmart client and would like to access our archive of webinars, then please visit our website biz-smart.co.uk and go to the Smart Room page. Our host joining me today is BizSmart Select member Sara Marrett from the HR department. Before we start our webinar, can I ask you all to use the question mark function on your screen to post any questions that you may have for Sara, and she will do her best to answer them all at the end of the session. Okay, thanks Sara, over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon everybody, welcome to my webinar session where I'm going to cover, well, the title is the do's and don'ts of interviewing, but I'm hopefully going to go into a little bit more detail about recruiting generally if time permits. So just to briefly go through what I'm going to cover today, I'm going to give you some information about preparing for recruitment generally, interviewing, looking at CVs, etc. Some helpful, well hopefully you'll find helpful hints and tips. Deciding how to go about recruitment in the first place. Assessing your CV when it lands on your inbox or your doormat. Asking the right questions at interview because there can be some wrong ones. Just reminding you of the sort of listening skills that you should be using. Understanding body language in an interview situation, and that can be both your own body language and also that of the candidates in front of you. How to control the interview, and finally making the right decision. So first of all, just to go into sort of the preparation, it's key initially to understand the vacancy that you're looking to fill. And to help you with this, you should always do a job profile or job description so that you understand exactly what it is that you need. I have got a template job profile that I'll ask Caroline to send round after this webinar attached to the link in the presentation itself. You need to think about sourcing your candidates, and I'll come on to this shortly in terms of the various options you have available to you. In terms of logistics for an interview, this is key in terms of where you're going to be holding it. I appreciate that a lot of small business owners don't necessarily have a grand boardroom or meeting room to hold those in. So you need to think about perhaps booking a meeting room or a room in a hotel somewhere, or if you know of other small business owners that perhaps have got these sort of facilities, liaising with them and just see if you can use those. Holding it in an open office or the pub or something like that probably isn't the best, and you don't really want to be anywhere where you can be interrupted either. Always prepare your questions in advance. Don't try and wing it on the day. You need to be consistent with all the candidates in terms of the questions that you have and that you're going to be asking. So make sure you have those listed out. Also, it's important that you're in the right frame of mind before holding an interview. So think about your diary on that day when you're booking interviews in. Try not to book sessions with perhaps an aggravated supplier or customer beforehand, because trust me, you won't be in the right frame of mind after that sort of meeting. Just some useful points to note really. Not all vacancies necessarily need to be filled. Don't automatically think, oh, somebody's left, I need to replace them. Take a little bit of time if needs be. Changes in your business, especially small businesses, happen very quickly. So although you may need or think you need to fill that job straight away, that job itself may only exist for a short period of time if you know that there's going to be some changes coming up. If you are needing to recruit, the best source of information about a job may be the existing job holder before they leave. Although ideally you'll know exactly what it is that they have been doing, if the role's changed significantly since they started, it's worth just sitting down with them to have a bit of a review in terms of the day-to-day detail that they carry out. Think of a vacancy as perhaps being an opportunity to redefine some of the responsibilities that people do as well, or the hours that's currently involved in the role. Again, if they've been in the post for quite some time, the business itself may have changed and you might just need to look at the scope of the role a little bit. think about perhaps some unfulfilled tasks and responsibilities in the company that you may want to consider adding to that job and that job description. Perhaps you've got people in the business who have now been there sufficient time or trained enough that you're able to reallocate some work against them and give them a little bit more responsibility. That will certainly help with morale and motivation with your existing employees as well. Also, what's becoming more and more popular is job sharing. It can be very cost effective as well as productive for you as a business owner. The one thing I would point out with this though is that it's important, if you've got two people sharing a role, that there's some kind of handover time each day where they can discuss what's been done, what still needs to be done, particularly if perhaps it's, say, a credit control type of job where they're handling clients. If it's the same clients, they need to be aware of who they've been speaking to and what's been agreed with people. So that handover time is really important. So how can you go about recruiting? There's various options really. Internal advertising is good if you're of a sufficient size. This can demonstrate to existing employees that there are career opportunities within the business and that you're happy and willing to promote from within. Again, can help with retention of employees and their motivation levels. Local government initiatives, apprenticeships are very popular currently. And certainly a good way to get new and fresh blood into the business. However, on this, I would always consider the size of the organisation. It takes time and resource to train apprentices. A lot of them will have come either straight from school or college, won't have been in a work environment at all previously, so you can't expect them to come in, be able to sit them down at a computer and for them just to crack on with things. If you are currently perhaps a one-man band, sole trader, looking to take on your first employee, I wouldn't recommend taking on an apprentice because it would be down to you to train them and it does take a significant amount of time. But perhaps if you're looking to take on your second, third, fourth employee, apprenticeships is certainly something to consider. Recommendations is always a good way. Having a sort of a refer a friend policy works quite well in organisations where you can reward employees if they refer somebody to you and they successfully pass their probationary period, then that's something that works. Agencies, anybody that knows me well knows that I'm not a big fan of recruitment agencies for various reasons, but I do find if you've got a niche role, something you're perhaps finding difficult to recruit for or quite a technical position, then there are certainly good agencies out there that can help you with that. A good way still though is placing a job advert onto a website. I certainly work with one where it gets placed on all of the major job boards. People don't look in the local papers anymore for jobs and vacancies. However, by using job boards, it can automatically go on local press websites as well. So it gets in the local press, but more on websites and social media outlets. So that's worth considering as well. So you've done your advertising, etc., and you get CVs land on your doormat or hopefully in your inbox. What do you do? When you're looking at a CV, look for gaps in the chronology of them. Is there sort of 6 months, 12 months, 18 months gaps? If there are, that should cause some alarm bells if they haven't given any reasons within their CV or their covering letter as to why. If there's qualifications on their CV and you're specifically looking for a qualification, verify them with the relevant institutions and ask for copies of their certificates if you're inviting them along to interview so you can double check. It's very easy for people to put basically whatever they want in a CV and you need to be responsible for double checking and verifying them. When you're looking through the CV, sort of estimate and make a note of the average time spent in each job. That helps to identify whether someone's just going to use you as a stepping stone, whether they will just stay for 6 months, 12 months, looking for a move all the time for bigger and better things. And what you want to be looking for is some kind of loyalty from people. Judge whether the candidate is making a logical career move. Is it a promotion for them? Is it a sideways move? Perhaps they're just looking for relocation back to the area, which can be a key reason. If they're looking for a move outside completely of what they're currently doing, that's not necessarily a bad thing if you can look on their CV and see that they've got transferable skills that would still match with the role that you're looking for. Finally, on that one, if you look at the style of the CV, it will indicate whether they're well organised or not. By style of it, I mean you need to be looking at the layout, the structure, and the format. Is it concise? Are there errors in it? Is the grammar right, etc.? Do they use the same font? That all tells you about their attention to detail. Has it been done specifically for the role to which they're applying is also key, or is it just a standard one that they roll out regardless of the job they're applying for? A CV should be 2 pages, ideally 3 pages maximum. You don't want something that's War and Peace, and it should be concise. They should leave things in there or out of there that you can probe at interview stage. So what sort of questions should you be asking for? These are just some sample ones that I think are quite key, and a lot of it needs to be around the what, why, how, when and where, so that they have to give longer answers than just yes or no responses. So why do you want to change jobs? What are their greatest attributes? Previous relationship with employers? Highlights and lowlights of their careers can be quite interesting to go into. Problem solving and their long-term goals. It's always important to ask them, what are their long-term goals? Where do they see themselves in 5 or 10 years' time? And importantly, how does this role fit in with that? One of my favourite questions that I like asking at interviews is, if their other half was sat here, how would they describe them? That can be quite interesting, and you tend to get the negative answers out of them at that point rather than the positive, so it can be quite a good source of conversation. Also consider using competency-based questions at interviews, and these will probe people's real-life examples of what they've done in previous roles. For example, tell me about a time you've worked on a specific project. Tell me about a time where you've made some significant improvements in a previous role. This is also a good way of getting across your values and your culture of the business and whether they match those as well. So coming on to listening skills within an interview, you should be curious about their answers and probe them. Make sure you understand their answer, and if you feel they perhaps haven't answered your question, then try asking it in just a slightly different way and probe it a bit further. Jot down or make a list of the questions you're asking, and importantly write down their responses, because if you're interviewing 4 or 5 people, it's hard to remember what the first person or second person has said in response. Listen to their emotions and in particular their body language as well. It should be quite apparent if they've fallen out with a previous employer, because those emotions will still be running quite high. Be aware of your own bad habits in an interview, and I'll come across those a little bit later on. And try not to interrupt people either. The key thing about an interview is that 20% of the time you are speaking and 80% of the time you are listening. It shouldn't be the other way round. It's about them telling you what they're able to do, not how good you are and the company is. Remember, you're selling the business to them as well as in an interview, as well as them selling themselves. So just coming on to a little bit about body language, the do's and don'ts. Try not to yawn when they're speaking. I have seen this happen previously, and this is where the logistics of the day are important. If you're planning an interview for 7 o'clock in the evening and you've been working solid since 6 a.m, then it's going to be hard for you to be awake and alert. Try not to be fiddling with your pen or looking distracted during it. It can be very off-putting for them. It can be very tempting to keep looking at your watch during an interview. So what I always recommend is to take your watch off and perhaps put it on the table next to their CV or your paperwork. So you can glance at it because you need to be controlling the interview, but it's not as a distraction to you. Constantly touching your hair, ear and face can be very distracting for candidates as well and may lead them to be doing the same thing. Try and make sure that you are leaning forward when they're talking. That shows genuine interest. Important to make eye contact with them, and it's important for them to make eye contact with you as well. And smile at them. You want to get the best out of them in an interview. You may be nervous if you haven't carried out many interviews previously, but you'll only be half as nervous as they are. Try and make them feel relaxed. If it's informal and relaxed, you will certainly get the most out of them during the interview. Controlling the interview itself is about pace. Tell them how it's going to be structured and what to expect. I always advise that perhaps you ask them what they know about the company first. So have they gained an insight into the company, gone onto the website, etc. Then get them to go through their CV as an overview. Speak to them then about the role itself and put a little bit more information and background onto it. Then go through the questions and then give them an opportunity to go through the questions and pace it that way. Make sure you cover everything in the time allowed. As I say, consistency between the interviews is really important. Direct the candidates, so don't allow them to waffle on and go off subject for a long period of time. If they're struggling a little bit with an answer, help them out and perhaps word it in a slightly different way. Control the flow of the interview, keep to the structure that you've laid out at the start. Some silence can be awkward, but some candidates like to use a few seconds once you've asked them a question to get their thoughts around what their response is going to be. So don't automatically feel that they're struggling perhaps to answer the question, but that they're just using it as thinking time. Making the right decision is important. Consider the first impressions. They say first impressions count, and they really do. Were they on time to the interview? What's their appearance like? Have they gone about trying to find some company background first? Make sure you're matching them against your minimum requirements. Revert back to your job description and profile with what you were looking for. Don't make the mistake of thinking, well, this person is the best of a bad bunch, so I have to take them on. You can always go back to the drawing board. It's far better to get the right person, even if it takes that little bit longer, than getting the wrong person, costing you money and having to go back and do the whole process again. Use detailed notes, like I say. However, what you need to be aware of is that all candidates, even the rejected ones, have the right of sight of any recruitment notes that you make. So make sure there's no derogatory comments on there or discriminatory ones, i.e. too ancient is something I've seen written previously, and that's a big no-no. Don't allow any of your personal prejudices to come into your decisions. Weigh everything up about the candidate, including their qualifications, etc. Cultural fit is really, really important, so make sure that their values are the same as your company's. Use a second opinion if appropriate. So if you're able perhaps to do second interviews if you're not sure with an independent person, that's great. And also finally, perhaps consider some form of tests if appropriate. If it's an administration type role, then do an inbox exercise. Get them perhaps to type something up for you during the interview to check their attention to detail and accuracy. Finally, if anybody's got any questions, I'll be more than happy to take them now.
Okay, thank you very much, Sara. You've got a couple of questions come through. The first one is from Laura, and she asks, what shouldn't I be asking in an interview?
Okay, yes, there's certainly some don'ts in terms of questions, and that's around people's personal circumstances. So you shouldn't ask things about their marital status, whether they've got children, etc., or what their childcare arrangements are going to be. They could be considered to be discriminatory in an interview situation.
Okay, thank you very much. You've got another question, this one from Mel. When should right to work checks be carried out?
Okay, so right to work checks are about immigrations and immigrants that have come to the UK and whether they have a right to work here. If people are found to be unlawful and immigrants to the company, businesses can be charged up to £20,000 per illegal immigrant. So you really do need to do these checks. You need to do the checks prior to making a job offer. So what I always advise is that if you are asking people to interview, then get them to bring their right of ID along. There is a huge checklist of what's proof of ID, but generally it's passports or a visa if they are born outside of the UK and the EU.
Okay, thank you. Another question you got from Kevin. How do you avoid offering a position to a candidate and then finding they are persuaded to stay in their current job?
So what I would advise is at the end of an interview, once you've gone through everything, etc., ask them, are they still interested in the job? Because like I said before, it's not just about you interviewing them and finding them suitable, but they need to feel that the company and you as the manager and the owner match them as well. So always ask them, are they still interested? And it's not a bad thing to ask them the question, would there be anything that makes you want to stay with your existing employer? And perhaps probe the reasons why they're leaving their existing job.
Okay, great. Next question from Philip. What are the average time people stay in jobs these days? As considering how fast things change, these days should frequently changing jobs count against us?
Okay, so this is, I guess, comes back to where you're looking at the average time spent in a job. And this can change as people go through their career. I generally disregard the jobs that people have had as students and things like that because they will generally be sort of part-time temporary roles. A good sign of somebody staying in a job realistically when they first left and things, I would say on average is 2 years, because that shows they've got some consistency there, they were prepared to stay and learn things, and they weren't just going. A bad sign is if they've been 6 months here, 9 months there, 12 months there. So generally I would say 2 years on average, even with the constant change these days, is a good time. But again, always probe during the interview what their reasons were for leaving any previous employment.
Okay, I think those are all your questions.
Thank you.
Come through at the moment. Thank you again, Sara, for hosting today's webinar. I will be sending out a copy of the presentation and Sara's contact details out to you very shortly. So if you do have any further questions, then please do send them direct to Sara. But before we close, just a quick reminder that this webinar is part of our service to our Smart Room members. If you're not already a member or a BizSmart client and would like to access our archive of webinars, then please do visit our website, biz-smart.co.uk, and go to the Smart Room page. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day and that you can join us again very soon. Thank you for listening.